Struggling with finances while in grad school. Husband doesn't seem to understand. My partner and I officially tied the knot in the golden, crisp days of October earlier this year. It was a simple yet beautiful ceremony that marked the culmination of nearly 7 years of being together. 7 years filled with love, laughter, and the unspoken promise of standing by each other's sides through thick and thin. But as I write this now, I can't help but feel the weight of the word promise pressing down on my shoulders. It feels more like a distant echo than a solid reality. I'm 31 years old and currently pursuing a graduate degree to become a therapist, a profession I've dreamed about since my early 20s when I first discovered my passion for understanding people's emotional worlds. But the dream feels so far away most days. In this moment, I'm buried under the staggering weight of work, school, and an all-consuming anxiety that feels like an ever-present companion. To make ends meet, I juggle an exhausting mix of commitments, 2 freelance gigs that fluctuate unpredictably, a retail job that barely offers me a moment to breathe, and an unpaid internship that demands the kind of mental and emotional labor that leaves me drained by the end of the day. On top of all that, there's the relentless grind of graduate classes, assignments, and the nagging pressure to excel. When I calculate it all, my weeks stretch beyond 60 grueling hours. Even after all this effort, my yearly income barely touches $40,000 after taxes, a sum that feels laughably small given the monumental effort it takes to earn it. Every single dollar is accounted for, and even then, it never feels like enough. Rent, groceries, utilities, transportation, and the relentless drip of paying down debts, all of it conspires to keep me in a state of constant stress. My financial situation has become a cruel balancing act, one where even the slightest misstep could send everything crashing down. Adding to this mountain of stress is the lingering burden of personal credit card and medical debt, a painful reminder of the times when life simply refused to go according to plan. $5,000 might not seem like much in the grand scheme of things, but when you're barely keeping your head above water, it feels insurmountable. I tell myself that once I've finally paid it off, I'll be able to breathe a little easier, but that distant relief feels like a mirage, always visible but never quite within reach. And then, of course, there's the shadow of my student loans lurking ominously in the background. I know I'll have to confront them someday, but for now, they remain a problem for the future me to handle, a strategy that feels equal parts necessary and terrifying. My husband, a 33-year-old with an affable charm and a steady career, knows about all of this. He's aware of my debts, my financial struggles, and the emotional toll it all takes on me. But despite this awareness, the weight of my circumstances feels like mine alone to bear. I can't shake the feeling that I'm carrying this burden by myself, even as he stands beside me. And while he assures me with words of encouragement and promises of being in this together, those words often ring hollow when faced with the crushing reality of my daily life. There's a part of me that wonders how I ended up here, in this fragile, precarious existence. I had always imagined that marriage would bring a sense of unity, a partnership where burdens could be shared and dreams nurtured together. But instead, I find myself alone in the trenches, fighting battles that my husband seems blissfully unaware of. And as much as I love him truly, deeply love him, it's hard not to feel the stirrings of resentment in the quiet moments when exhaustion overtakes me. My husband earns an impressive salary, around $150,000 a year. It's a figure that, on paper, should provide a sense of stability and comfort. In contrast, my income barely scrapes by, and yet our arrangement for managing finances doesn't reflect this stark difference. Our rent is $2,700 a month, a hefty price tag that comes with living in a high-cost-of-living area. It's the kind of rent that leaves me clutching my chest every time the payment date approaches. Despite the disparity in our incomes, we split the rent and other shared expenses 50-50, a system that feels increasingly untenable for me but seems to work just fine for him. We've never fully combined our finances, a decision that I had accepted in the early years of our relationship. Back then, it felt logical. We were independent people with our own financial lives, and keeping things separate avoided complications. But now, As I juggle multiple jobs and scrape together every penny to meet my share of the bills, it's becoming clear that this arrangement no longer makes sense. I've tried bringing it up, expressing my desire to adjust how we manage money so that we could be more of a team, but those conversations never seem to go anywhere. The status quo persists, and I'm left feeling unheard. Meanwhile, his life remains largely the same. He works a steady job with predictable hours and ample compensation, while I'm drowning in responsibilities, anxieties, and physical exhaustion. I envy the ease with which he navigates his days, the way he can come home from work and unwind without the suffocating pressure of debt and deadlines looming over him. I can't help but wonder if he truly sees what my life looks like, or if he chooses not to. This imbalance has bred a resentment in me that I hate acknowledging. He's a good man, loving, supportive, and kind in so many ways. I know he cares for me deeply, and that he doesn't intend to be dismissive or indifferent. But intentions don't change the reality of our situation. I'm running myself into the ground to keep up, while he coasts through life relatively unburdened. It feels unfair, and that sense of injustice gnaws at me in the quiet hours when I'm too tired to do anything but stare at the ceiling and wonder how much longer I can sustain this pace. I've tried talking to him about how I feel, about the weight I carry and the exhaustion that has become my constant companion. I've told him how overwhelmed I am, how the financial strain is not just a practical issue but an emotional one that's eroding my sense of stability and happiness. When I do, he offers words of reassurance, saying things like, "We're in this together," or "Everything will work out." For a brief moment, those words offer a flicker of comfort, but that flicker is quickly extinguished by the harsh reality of our situation. It doesn't feel like we're in this together. From where I'm standing, it feels like I'm on my own. It's not that he's dismissive of my struggles. He listens, nods, and holds me when I cry. But then, nothing changes. The bills still get split evenly, my workload remains overwhelming, and his life continues as though nothing is amiss. I don't know if he truly understands the depth of what I'm experiencing. I don't know if he realizes how close I am to breaking under the weight of it all. And yet, even in the depths of my frustration, I love him. That love makes the resentment feel even more painful, as though I'm betraying the very foundation of our relationship by harboring these feelings. I want to believe that we can find a solution together, that we can bridge this divide and create a partnership that feels equitable and supportive. But right now, it feels like I'm the only one actively trying to make that happen. And the longer this imbalance persists, the harder it is to keep believing that things will get better. It's glaringly obvious that the way we've been managing our finances is not sustainable, not for me, at least. Every month feels like a desperate scramble to make ends meet, and every week a test of my endurance as I push myself further and further just to keep up. The stress is relentless, an ever-present storm cloud that casts a shadow over everything I do. And yet, I can't seem to find a way forward, let alone a solution. What I truly need, what I ache for, is more support. Not necessarily a grand gesture or some sweeping financial overhaul, but just enough to make this bearable. If I could give up one of my jobs, even temporarily, it would be life-changing. Just one less weight to carry. One less demand on my time and energy. It would give me room to breathe, to focus on my studies without constantly calculating how many hours of work I'll need to put in to cover the next bill. It feels like such a simple thing, and yet the very idea of asking for it fills me with guilt and hesitation. Because at the end of the day, it's his money. He earned it through his own hard work, his own choices and sacrifices. Who am I to tell him what to do with it? What right do I have to ask him to shoulder more of the financial burden, to give up any part of his own security or comfort for my sake? These questions haunt me, and no matter how much I try to silence them, they always return. I tell myself that I'm being unreasonable, that I'm asking too much. Maybe this is just how it's supposed to be, an unspoken rule that we each fend for ourselves, even within the bounds of marriage. But then, another voice, quieter yet insistent, whispers back, "Isn't that the very opposite of what marriage is supposed to mean? Aren't we supposed to be a team, united not just in love but in the practicalities of life?" Isn't part of loving someone being willing to make sacrifices for their well-being? If the roles were reversed, I know what I would do without hesitation. If he were the one burning out under the strain of work and debt, if he were the one losing sleep over unpaid bills and mounting responsibilities, I wouldn't think twice about stepping in. I'd do whatever it took to lighten his load, to make sure he had the time and space to succeed. Not because it's my obligation, but because his well-being matters to me. Because his struggles would feel like my struggles, just as his successes would feel like my successes. That's what partnership means to me. And yet, when I think about asking the same of him, the guilt creeps in again. I imagine his reaction: not anger, not refusal, but perhaps quiet resentment. Maybe he'd feel like I'm trying to take advantage of him, or that I'm not pulling my weight. Maybe he'd agree out of a sense of duty but secretly harbor frustration about it. The thought of that possibility keeps me silent, even as my body and mind scream for relief. What makes it even harder is that we've never really talked about money in a way that feels open and honest. Sure, we've discussed the logistics, splitting bills, covering expenses, but the deeper conversations about values, priorities, and what we want our financial life to look like together, those have remained untouched, shrouded in an unspoken tension that neither of us seems willing to break. Maybe it's because we've been together for so long, and there's an assumption that we're already on the same page. Or maybe it's because money is such an uncomfortable topic to broach, even with someone you love and trust. Whatever the reason, the silence is taking its toll. Every day that passes without addressing this feels like another stone added to the mountain I'm carrying. And as much as I want to believe that I can keep climbing, there's a part of me that knows I can't do it forever. Something has to give. But what? And how do I even begin to navigate this without making everything worse? Then it hits me again, like a sudden gust of wind that knocks the breath out of my chest. We are married now. This isn't just about me or him anymore. This is about us. This is about the life we've chosen to build together, the promises we made to stand by each other no matter what. And if the roles were reversed, if he were the one stretched to his breaking point, struggling under the weight of unrelenting stress, I wouldn't hesitate. I wouldn't even think twice about making sacrifices to help him, because his mental and emotional well-being would matter more to me than any bank account or personal comfort. I would want to step in, not out of obligation, but because I love him. Because seeing him happy and thriving would make me happy, too. That's the whole point of being married, isn't it? To lift each other up when life becomes too heavy to bear alone. To recognize that when one of us is struggling, the other feels it too, even if not directly. Our lives are intertwined now, and what affects one of us inevitably affects both of us. So why can't I bring myself to ask for the same in return? Why does the idea of asking for help feel so fraught, so laden with guilt and fear? I tell myself it's because I don't want to burden him, but deep down, I know it's more complicated than that. It's the nagging worry that he might not see things the same way, that he might not feel the same sense of responsibility toward me that I feel toward him. It's the fear of rejection, not of me as a person, but of the vulnerability I'm putting on the table. I keep coming back to the question, what is the best way to approach this? I'd like to think that, as someone studying to be a therapist, I'd have some kind of roadmap for navigating this kind of situation. But when it comes to my own life, all of that training seems to fly out the window. I'm just another person fumbling in the dark, trying to figure out how to communicate my needs without causing conflict or misunderstanding. Lately, I've been toying with the idea of marriage counseling. Not because our relationship is in crisis, we still love each other deeply, and in so many ways, we're incredibly strong, but because we clearly have some blind spots when it comes to how we handle money and support each other. A neutral third party might be able to help us untangle the mess of emotions and assumptions that have built up over time. But then the doubts creep in. What if he resents the suggestion? What if he sees it as an accusation, rather than an opportunity to strengthen our relationship? And beyond that, can we even afford counseling right now, when every dollar feels so precious? Another idea I've been considering is financial planning. Maybe sitting down with someone who can look at the numbers objectively and help us create a more balanced approach would make a difference. But again, the practicalities rear their head. I have almost no assets, and my financial situation feels like such a mess that I'm not even sure where to begin. Would a financial planner even be worth it at this point, or would it just feel like another expense we can't afford? As I sit with these thoughts, I realize that I don't have all the answers. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the first step isn't about finding the perfect solution, but about starting the conversation. About sitting down with my husband and laying everything out, not just the facts of our finances, but the emotional toll they're taking on me. About being honest, even if it feels uncomfortable or vulnerable. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to feel resentful. I don't want to feel like I'm navigating this alone while he moves through life unscathed. I want to feel like we're truly in this together, not just in words but in actions. I want to believe that we can find a way to support each other in a way that feels fair and sustainable. And most of all, I want to feel like our marriage is a partnership in every sense of the word. So, here I am, putting these thoughts into words and hoping that when the time comes, I'll find the courage to share them with him. Hoping that he'll listen, that he'll understand, and that together, we can figure out a way forward. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that I don't want this struggle to define our life together. I want us to be stronger for it, not in spite of it. And that, I believe, is a hope worth holding onto.